So hi, everyone, and welcome. Today's talk is Spiritual Chat on Mental Disorders, and today's date is Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. So this topic was a request from someone who wanted my physical take on mental illness. This is a good friend of mine. She wanted to have me speak on mental illness or mental disorders, as she felt there were stigmas attached to these disorders where society treats these people badly or avoids them completely due to not understanding what these disorders are. And so coming from a place of ignorance, because, we fear what we don't understand, if they had a greater understanding, they would then be treating these people better. So even though there is a belief that vaccinations and medications have had a huge influence in this, even been the cause in some cases of these disorders, I'm of the opinion that every soul has chosen its path of experience for what it wants to achieve in this lifetime. And soul contracts would have been set up beforehand with all those affected or involved in that journey. So keeping that in mind, let's begin. So I'll just I wanted to give the definitions and then my metaphysical take on some of it, or my understanding with the clients that I've seen over the years that have had some of these disorders. And so I looked up the definition of mental illness, and it says a condition which causes serious disorder in a person's behavior or thinking. And then the definition of mental disorder, a wide range of conditions that affect mood, thinking, and behavior. So what will be covered, because I think definitely there'll be too much information to do at one time. So I'm going to split it over today and tomorrow. I don't know if it'll go 3 days, but I'm going to try and see if I can squash it into 2. So just to give you an idea of what's going to be covered, so whatever we don't do today, we'll be doing tomorrow. So the different disorders, and I put the mental disorders in quotation marks because to me, there's a whole nother level of what's really going on to what they've actually just put in that box. So we'll cover schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, Asperger's, autism, ADD and ADHD, post-traumatic stress disorder, multiple personality disorder, or dissociative identity disorder, as they call it now, clinical depression, anxiety disorder, dementia, obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia. And they didn't have Alzheimer's listed as part of the disorder, but I've included Alzheimer's, and then Down syndrome. So although it's not that is not a disorder per se, people still judge that, not understanding, and I felt that needs to be addressed because those are really, really special people. So we'll start off with clinical depression. So the definition of clinical depression is a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities causing significant impairment in daily life. Now, as I've stated in past talks on my channel, we are first and foremost an energy being and then a physical body. So when there is anything going on in the physical body, there is definitely something also happening in the energy bodies. So your aura or your energy field is what contains your energy bodies, okay? These energy bodies are called the 4 lower bodies, namely the mental, emotional, physical bodies. And the etheric body holds the blueprint for the physical body. So that's comparable to a schematic plan of a building, okay? So in the case of depression, the word comes from the Latin word depremere, which means pressed down. So it's as if the energy system is pressed down with the weight of what is going on around the individual. When we remember something from the past, we are accessing the information or memory as if it were happening right now. Energetically, we are right there. Your body goes real time to that moment as if it was happening right now. People who suffer from depression normally have more than one traumatic memory active at the same time. This is like a record playing in the background. So they may not even be consciously aware of those memories that have been triggered, but just feel overwhelmed and unable to handle the feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Depression can be caused from loss or trauma or postpartum depression, which honestly, I cannot believe that expectant mothers are not warned about postpartum depression. And the hormones are all over the place because of the pregnancy, etc. And then when you have the baby, you're so overwhelmed by all that's going on. And this little person who's totally dependent on you, and you don't even feel like you can cope with yourself, let alone also have the responsibility of a little baby. And yet they never warn them about those things. They're always just left to work that out for themselves or find out in other ways. And many people many clients that I've dealt with regarding depression, when I've found out when it started after they had their first baby. So not all of it is a traumatic event that has happened. It was just where the hormones were all over the place and nobody explained to them what it was or how to get it right. So the postpartum depression is not a small thing. It's a big thing that people should be aware of so that they can make sure they take steps to be supported, etc., as they're going through that. So depression is where a person is feeling overwhelmed and powerless, and there's a sense of hopelessness in their life. They can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. As I've said before, I've been able to help many clients clear past traumas and grief through energy healing and clearing of sabotaging subconscious beliefs and patterns. So it's not a hopeless situation. It is something that can be addressed. The medical profession consider a clinical diagnosis of depression as something the person will have to deal with for life. But I know that if the underlying issues are cleared, the person is able to live a normal, healthy, and fulfilling life. The medical profession are trained to look at the presenting condition, which is the effects, the symptoms, and treat that and not the cause. But if the cause is removed, then it naturally follows that the effects will also cease. Depression used to be seen as psychosomatic. In other words, it's all in the mind, just your imagination, not real. But it is very real for those experiencing it. So they feel like there is something wrong with them and that they must be crazy. And that stigma still exists today. That's why people won't seek help, because they don't want to get the diagnosis of depression. So if anybody says, I think you're depressed, they react badly because they don't want the stigma attached to them of depression. But people with depression can be helped. It is something that they can overcome. And I know, because I have helped many, many people. People have to go over their meds, or at least take their meds with the intention of it being for their highest good, etc. So one can always, if you've got to continue taking meds, there are certain intentions you can put in place that your body benefits from the medication. And then also notice when people are down and they are isolating themselves, because that's what happens with people with depression. Just pay attention to the cry for help. There is something going on. So the earlier you catch it, the better it is for everyone concerned. Then the other one is bipolar disorder, which was previously called manic depression. So the definition of it is a disorder associated with episodes of mood swings ranging from depressive lows to manic highs. So one can experience highs and lows in life when you're under stress without necessarily being bipolar. So sometimes this diagnosis, I feel, is given too freely and easily, as if they've got a full-blown bipolar disorder, when in actual fact there's just something that the person's going through in their life. And then they love to quickly medicate that, which causes another whole level of problems. So if you are bipolar or manic depressed, it's when the two extremes are presenting, not just mild highs and lows. The individual has difficulty coping with what life throws at them, and then they kind of swing from being in a deep low where they have difficulty functioning with everyday things to manic highs where they are overconfident and don't give a damn. You know, I would use another word if it wasn't recording, and don't give a damn what anyone thinks. So when they come across overconfident and in your face, and then are want to just keep away from everybody and really be low, that's what manic depressive is. In some cases, it is found that lithium is required as that chemical is missing in the brain. So one would take the lithium exactly like you would take iron tablets if you had an iron deficiency. But some don't want to take the lithium because they think, I'm not crazy, I don't need to take that chemical. But if it's what's required to make your brain fire correctly, then you need to do it until you can find other ways to be able to clear that. Because otherwise your functioning will be impaired, especially when they found that specific chemical is missing in the brain, which I spoke to my friend who has overcome bipolar using all the methods that I'm involved in and other ones. I had her come to me for 10 days when I was still living in Durban. I said, right, you're coming down here and we're going to whack it with everything we've got. So I did work on her, and she did a whole lot of other things, including the foot spa thing that you use where you put your feet in the water and it creates you have an ionator in the water where it creates a deficient something in the imbalance in the water that then draws all the toxins out of your system so that it wasn't a buildup of stuff, because that also causes problems, a buildup of the medication, because the body's not always able to process and get rid of some of the medication. That's for all medication. And so bipolar disorder, I have proof that it can be overcome. And she can recognize when she starts feeling the negative feelings coming up, and she can identify it because she's now, and she's even written a book on it. So that's bipolar disorder is like every Tom, Dick, and Harry has been given that diagnosis. So I'm not sure that half the people that are given that diagnosis is really what's going on. I don't know if these guys are programmed that, okay, the next 100 people that come through the office door, we're going to say that they've got bipolar if they've got anything that they're having difficulty dealing with. It actually makes me mad, like a red flag to a bull. Okay, so then we've got dementia. So the definition of dementia is a group of thinking and social symptoms that interferes with daily functioning. And then the two main brain functions that are affected is memory loss and judgment. So with dementia, a person has got mental confusion and disorientation. They have personality changes. They want to sleep a lot. They have memory loss and anxiety. But it's actually where they are kind of disconnecting from life or withdrawing from life. And I've just found when I've heard what those people's story is, there's normally trauma or abusive situations that they've been through in their life, and they must get to a stage where they don't want to remember that part. Because for some people, they are aware of, it's not that happened at that point in my life, and now I'm look where I am today and everything is fine. Some people cannot let go of that. It's something that there's things in the environment that remind them of that stuff all the time. So it's a constant thing that they are conscious of. And so they can choose to want to disconnect from that. And that is normally where dementia can set in. And that's also with Alzheimer's. So the next one is Alzheimer's. And they also call that senile dementia. So the Alzheimer's, they say, is a progressive disease that destroys the memory and other important mental functions. So Alzheimer's is really where, so dementia, people can actually battle to function, whereas with Alzheimer's, it's where they lose their memory, and then they can't remember how to do things. It's also where it affects their functioning, but it's different to what dementia is. And so I believe with both of these, there's a disconnect from everyday living, things that have been hidden deep, that they have witnessed or done themselves, that they don't want to remember, and so shut their memory down, so become defensive and aggressive, is an instinctive defense mechanism that may kick out, okay? The fact that they can have totally lucid moments and remember things clearly means the information is there and has not been destroyed or erased. So There are times when they can recognize somebody and then be able to give a whole detail about a particular time in their life. And then there's other times where they can't recognize them. So to me, if it was the destruction of the memory, if the memory was disappearing, where's it coming from when it does pitch up? So I believe it's more a disconnect of the individual not wanting to acknowledge life. But they don't realize if you want to disconnect from the memories, you're kind of disconnecting from life, because your life, that is part of your life. Okay, the next one is schizophrenia. So the definition of schizophrenia is a disorder that affects a person's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly. And interestingly enough, it says the cause is unknown. So the person experiences thought disorder, amnesia, belief that thoughts are not their own, which to me is a red flag of there's something else going on, disorientation, mental confusion, anxiety, delusion, detached from self, hallucination, paranoia, hearing voices. So it's like, chances are these people are psychic. So they can hear and feel and see things that nobody else around them can validate for them. So the way they react is in survival mode, because their life is feeling out of control. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand why they're hearing voices. Meantime, they're clairvoyant. There was one of the authors who had, they're a psychoanalyst, and they were the head of a psychiatric hospital, and they themselves were psychic. And they said they came to realize, working in the hospital, that most of the people in the hospital were all psychic. They were either clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, so they could either see, feel, hear. But when they were describing it to people who don't understand it, and remember, the church has really pushed that anything like that is actually demonic. So nobody could explain it to them. So in order for society to deal with it, they then lock those people away, because those people are not, they're not going to harm anybody. It's interesting how warped the way we've been taught in society, that whatever looks okay is okay. Whatever looks bad is bad. And yet, when you hear of the people that do bad things, the nicest looking people, you would never dream that they would do the bad things that they did. And yet the poor person who's a tramp, or they wear their whole life on their sleeves, they don't know how to hide it. They don't know how to put a mask up. They just they show exactly how they feel, where they've been, how life has treated them, and they're seen as bad. It's just like it's a total warp. So when people see someone and they feel threatened because they don't understand it, they lock the person away, because they think rather keep them out of society, because they're a danger to society, which they are not. Most of the time they are not. They're misunderstood. All they need is love and understanding, compassion, So the next one is multiple personality disorder. I've tried to keep them kind of together with what things would be similar. And I particularly love this subject, this particular one. So multiple personality disorder, the definition is, and it says now, called dissociative identity disorder. They keep on renaming these things. A disorder characterized by the presence of two or more distinct personality states. This is usually a reaction to trauma as a way to help a person avoid bad memories. So yes, there is the one where they disconnect because of a trauma that's happened, where they withdraw and things start happening. But there's an amazing book called The Secret Science Behind Miracles by Max Freedom Long. And in that book, he's explaining the whole thing about the Kahuna tradition, or the Huna tradition, where they talk about the three levels of, I think it's mana. So you got the subconscious and the superconscious. And so they knew that in their tradition, long before psychology was even discovered in the Western world. They already had what is now known as conscious, subconscious and superconscious, they already had terms for it in the Huna tradition. And so it gives a whole lot of different information in there that's absolutely amazing. But one of the stories that really stuck out for me was when he was talking about, there was this girl, a story of a girl. She was the daughter of a prominent California attorney. And so the girl was now 28 years old. From when she was 4 years old, every 4 years she would go to sleep. So the first 4 years of her life, and she went to sleep. And when she woke up, she was another personality. Now, they call it a personality, okay? It's actually a soul. So the original girl was all girly. The one that came through after 4 years was a tomboy. Then 4 years after that, the girly one came back. And then 4 years after that, the tomboy one came back. So these parents were attached to both girls, both personalities, because each time they had them for 4 years. And the interesting thing was that when the girl, so this would have been when the girl was 8 years old. So when the one was 8 years old, the mother was reading her a story in the conservatory, okay? And then so then the other girl came through, and so that was 4 years on. That would have been 12. And then, so maybe it would have been at 12, not 8. So at 12 years old, she was reading a story but then the other girl came through, the other personality. Then at 16, it just so happened that the mom was reading a book in the conservatory, and the girl was sitting in the same chair that at the previous time the other one had left. And so she had fallen asleep in the chair, and when she woke up, so this is now at 16, when she woke up, the girl that came through had no awareness of the fact that 4 years had gone by, and she said, "Mom, why did you stop reading that story? Why aren't you reading anymore?" Something like that, to read her the story. She was expecting the mom to continue the story from when she was 12 years old. So now they just knew that this is what happened, but now she reached 28, and they thought, you know what? They're about to change again. And I mean, they want this girl to now be able to settle down and have a family. But I mean, how do you marry a wife who's all girly and then ends up a tomboy, or vice versa? You know, like you can't do that. So they called some psychologists in to see if they could please help them. So they interviewed the girl and said, "Look, we need you to stay now. We don't want you to go. So when you fall asleep, we want to make sure that you don't." So they coached her to say, "This is what you need to do." They put her under hypnosis, because these were all psychologists. I think there were 3 or 4 of them working with her. And they said, "Now we need you to be sure that you stay. You don't let the other personality come through, or you blend the 2 personalities." And so then she went to sleep, and then when she woke up, it was the other personality. And they said, no, you need to go. We need the other one to stay or to blend. And then they called the other one in, and the other one said, "No, I tried, but I can't do that. We can't seem to blend. So I don't know what to do." So they were trying hypnosis to make the one personality go and the other one stay, the one that was there stay. And it just went on and on until the next thing there was just silence. The girl's body lay there like she was dead. It was just absolutely still, and they didn't know what to do. And I think they were trying to call one of them in or whatever. And the next thing, this voice came through that was with huge authority and explaining with huge authority and greater understanding. So it was quoting things from both girls' lives. So both personalities, let's call it personalities. So would speak about the things that happened of the 2 of them, and said that what they have chosen to do is to have their life experience, both of them, through the same body. So either you accept that this continues like that, because they can't blend. They're 2 separate See, they don't say that it's two separate souls, but obviously it's two separate souls, because how do they blend and become one? It's not possible. And so they were like, no, but we are demanding because you can't have a proper life. And it's like, well, this is what they've chosen. So you have two choices. You either allow this to continue the way that they have decided to do this, or I'll withdraw both of them and you can be left with the corpse. And so they were freaking out because they didn't know what to do, but they didn't even know how to challenge this superior force, because they were so, whoever that was, which I presume would be the superconscious, was in such authority and explained in detail that there was nothing that they could argue back to say why it shouldn't work like that or why it shouldn't be done like that. And of course, with that ultimatum, needless to say, they just decided, okay, then please rather bring them back. We don't want to, we don't want that to happen. And so I presume that's how they lived out the rest of their lives. But that wouldn't be personalities. That would be souls. Because a personality is just a trait that you have, that you take on, you know. And so when there's another story that he tells also to do with, I don't know if it was to do with schizophrenia or multiple, I think it was multiple personalities. I don't think they called it schizophrenia. I think they were calling it multiple personalities, and they'd be call it A1 and B1 and all that. But as these different personalities came into the body, if the one personality had an allergy to, I don't know, nuts or something, when the other personality, one of the others came through, that body didn't have an allergy to nuts. So it seemed like the allergies or the preferences or like the food cravings or what they wanted to eat or what they wanted to do was associated with the personality, which would be the soul, and not the physical body. So that same physical body that was allergic to one thing that maybe give them a rash, when the other personality was in there and eating that same food, the physical body wasn't affected at all. So does the body have the allergies, or is it a reflective of the issues of the soul or personality that is experiencing? You know, what is it? It just adds a whole nother level of how much we do not understand what's going on. And I truly believe that when you're getting these with schizophrenia or the multiple personality disorder, those are different souls that are working in the same, using the same body for whatever it is they want to achieve. And they choose to do it in that way. And it was interesting with that story of the girls, of those two souls, that each one was aware of the other one's 4 years because they could read it in the record of their subconscious. So they knew what had happened in the 4 years while they were away. And then when they asked her, well, where were you? She just said, I was here. But obviously they can't explain where the soul was. That would have thrown a spanner in the works, and then nothing would have worked after that. But clearly it's another level of understanding, if you understand that it can be different souls. But I mean, science or the medical profession are not going to want to acknowledge that at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the dementia and the Alzheimer's, when they're talking or mumbling or whatever, that they're not speaking to other beings that are there to support them with what they're going through. You know, that's my belief. I really do believe that that's really what's going on. Okay, then anxiety disorder. So the definition of anxiety disorder is a mental health disorder characterized by feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. So it's natural to feel nervous or anxious when faced with something new or the unknown. Okay, like there are some people that'll say, some stars that go on stage, whether they're singers or whether they're actors, they'll say they still get that butterflies in their stomach every time before they go on, even though they may have been doing that for 20 years. And so it's natural for the body to kind of feel that kind of thing. What isn't normal is when it is so overwhelming that it affects your functioning in everyday life. Okay, so there's many ways that the way that the anxieties can play out. So the one is social anxiety, okay? And this can be due to concern about others' opinions of you, or being self-conscious, feeling like you don't fit in. So, all the indigos feel like that all the time. And this is a huge problem with teenagers, especially with the amount of cyberbullying that goes on with social media. There was bullying before, and now you've got social media added to it. And there are many people that have got a big mouth behind a screen, but they would never say those kind of things to a person face to face. Although you will find those who would be quite happy to also do that kind of mean thing face to face. So this could be a result of where they'd had a bad experience, where they were embarrassed by something that happened that were witnessed by others, or due to low self-esteem or poor body image, no self-confidence, etc. This should not be taken lightly. The underlying issue needs to be addressed. Otherwise, this can lead to drug or alcohol addiction as coping mechanisms. It's not just, that's just how they are. She is like that. She doesn't really like being around people. You need to find out why, because there's something big going on, and where it can lead to is can be major, and it's easy for them to choose alcohol or drugs to be able to cope or function in any social situation. And that could also be the underlying thing that can lead to eating disorders. Also, if left unchecked, it can also lead to depression. So these people are often easy targets by others to make fun of them or for them to be the butt end of jokes. But interestingly enough, very often the people who target them also suffer from insecurities, but hide them well by bringing attention to others' weaknesses. Because people who are really strong do not prey on weaker people. They will normally defend them. So notice who the bullies are. They are damaged goods. There's something going on with them, and they don't want anybody to know about it. So they bully others, or they bring attention to others so nobody notices them. It's very weird how that is. Then the other thing is panic attacks. So this is where sudden or intense fear is experienced that brings about a panic attack. It is literally where the body freezes up and you are unable to breathe due to the intense fear experience. So you can try and breathe, but you almost feel like you can't take air in, like your lungs are not expanding. It's almost like you feel like your whole body's in a spasm. And you really feel like you could die, because that's exactly how the subconscious mind is interpreting it. It's whatever's threatening, this could be death. And that's why it is so paralyzing. And sometimes people can't identify what is behind the panic attack. So they may not register what has actually triggered it. It's not always obvious. And then also there are some phobias that can lead to panic attacks, okay? So if one can identify the underlying cause of a panic attack, it can be cleared. You can identify what's a cause of anxiety, that can be cleared. There's nothing of what I'm talking about that cannot be shifted, okay? So phobias. Now, these are also a form of anxiety. I didn't even know there were names for some of these things. So there's a fear of flying in an airplane, which is aerophobia, fear of heights, acrophobia, fear of closed spaces, claustrophobia, fear of crowded public places, agoraphobia, fear of embarrassment. I didn't know there was such a fear. I know people that can kind of give them a panic attack. I didn't know it was actually considered a phobia. Calagalophobia, fear of elevators. I would have thought that would have been claustrophobia, but it's elevatophobia. Fear of spiders, arachnophobia. Fear of snakes. There wasn't a name for that. Fear of driving a car, because I know some people feel like they're not in control. Anything can happen from the outside. So that is a real phobia as well. And then fear of water, which is aquaphobia. So all phobias are caused either by a stressful or traumatic experience, a frightening event, or it can also be learned from someone in the family. So if a person's mother was totally aquaphobic, where she had a fear of water, that can make a child, that can impress the child with the be careful of water, because it's something that can do that can harm you. So a lot of the phobias can be passed down to children because their parents they observed what their parents were doing. So once again, these are real experiences for the people who have these fears. It is not just a case of get over it. It is not something that can just be overcome easily, because it's something that they feel totally they have no control over. And again, the energy healing and stuff can clear those things. So all anxieties, no matter how they appear, have an underlying experience of trauma related to them that can be shifted. Okay, so the next one is obsessive compulsive disorder. And the definition of that is excessive thoughts or obsessions that lead to repetitive behaviors or compulsions. So this can be the need to control the environment or people, because these individuals feel the need to control life because of experiences they may have had where they felt out of control, or they weren't able to control what happened. Okay. This can be regarding abuse or the environment that they grew up in, if it was volatile, where they were always on edge waiting for the other shoe to drop. So if a person grew up in an environment where it wasn't a clean environment, or they were criticized and told they were dirty, stay away from me, you dirty, you stink, those children, and they don't even have to be dirty or stink or whatever, they can grow up to be absolutely obsessive compulsive about washing their hands all the time, needing to have a shower morning, noon, and night, needing to make sure their clothes are ironed in the morning before they put it on, even though it was ironed when it was put in the cupboard. Everything's got to be just right. Their house, they've got to keep cleaning their house from top to bottom. It's almost like they can't do that in life, so they do it with what they have got control over. So God help anybody that comes and moves something out of place and don't put it back exactly the way it was, because that causes real trauma for the person, because it feels like the original trauma that happened is awakened, where they're feeling out of control. So it's not something that, what she's like, she's OCD, or, she's just got a problem. And none of those things should be taken lightly. Do you think those people like that they like that? They don't know how to change it, but they also know that they can't ignore it, because it creates a whole another level of discomfort for them in their lives. So it's something that really needs to be respected, and don't try to push them. Don't try and deliberately do things to upset the apple cart, because you think, that'll make them get over it, they'll stop doing that. No, it doesn't work like that. They need help, and medication is not the way to go with all this kind of stuff. Otherwise, you'll be medicated for the rest of your life, because if you don't clear what the underlying issue is, that will stay. It can't go with medication. And then, of course, the medication just has to keep on getting stronger and stronger and stronger, which doesn't help anybody. So there's also, of course, where people steal or they lie, and they are not in control of themselves because they're unable to stop the compulsion, the need that comes up, where they need to steal or they need to lie. And this can also present as compulsive spending, gambling, sex, etc. There's always an underlying trauma that is associated with that. So people that lie, it's because they used to get into trouble if they told the truth. So no matter what they did, they would get into trouble. I remember with this one boy that I had a session with, a young boy, and one of the things that he was getting into trouble with, it's the same boy I spoke of in one of the earlier recordings, where his dad was in South Africa and his mom was in the UK, and he was torn between the two. And when he was in South Africa, no matter what he did, the stepmom would pick on him. So he would lie because he thought, well, if he says this, then maybe he won't get into trouble. So he would just lie to try and stop, because he didn't know how to plug all the holes of no matter what he did, everything he did was wrong. But he wasn't a liar. It was just a coping mechanism because of the circumstance that he was in. And somehow the stepmom had even got the maid on board that was involved with him that would also lie and say things that he had done that he hadn't done. So people who lie are not, it's not so much that they're liars. There's a reason behind the lying, and then they get to the point where they don't know their life in any other way. So they just, on the spur of the moment, just tell any lie in order for them to be okay in that moment. And they don't always realize the repercussions, or may not even remember the lies that they tell, because they're just doing it on the run, in order for them to survive. And then, of course, the stealing is where they're not able to get things in any way, so they will then have to steal it in order to survive. But then, of course, when they no longer need, let's say, the food to survive, then it goes to bigger things. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about as a compulsive disorder. I'm not talking about guys that go and rob banks, okay? That's a whole different thing. That's completely different. I'm not talking about criminal activity now, although this kind of thing, that they could find themselves in jail if they're shoplifting or whatever, but this falls into a different arena to the criminal stuff. There's something else going on with this. And then, so always there's a story behind it. Nobody is born obsessive compulsive, okay? If ever you want to know, is it a natural thing? No, just check. Is a baby like that when they first arrive here? No, which means it's learned behavior or something happens that triggers something like that as a defense mechanism for survival. Okay, so the next one is eating disorders. So the definition of eating disorders is illness in which people experience severe disturbances in their eating behaviors and related thoughts and emotions. And I'm just going to throw this out there because I can, that are honestly on, when they talk about Asperger's and they say there's a scale of where you're at on the spectrum. Okay, I truly believe that there is probably a spectrum with eating disorders, because there are so many people that are obsessive about eating vegan or eating vegetarian or eating, and then if they eat a particular way, they think everybody else has to eat the way that they eat. There's nothing normal about that. You should be allowing people to choose what they want. But if you're obsessive about food, that is an eating disorder, even though it may not show as anorexia or bulimia. Why can't you just go and grab a sandwich, or just go and think, oh, that makes my think I'm going to have to eat? No, it's working out the calories. They've made it an obsessive compulsive thing. I truly believe so, because some people will only eat what they know will be 100 grams, so they're only having that intake for the day. So there are many people that have eating disorders because their whole focus is on food, what they eat, what they mustn't eat, how they must eat it, when they must eat it, how much of it they must eat it. Don't tell me that's normal, because the child doesn't come out like that. Okay. So to me, there are way more people with eating disorders that they don't even know they have an eating disorder, because they're so programmed now in being consciously aware, and the TV chucking that stuff at you all the time of how it should be and what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. There's so many rules and regulations about it that I think most people have an eating disorder because they don't just allow their natural instincts to consume what they feel like eating, or not consume what they don't want. I go by my gag craving reflex. So if one can shift that understanding and understand that your body will always crave what it needs if you allow it to, if you stop keeping it in a state of famine. The minute you have your body where it thinks, oh my gosh, we need to store everything that goes in the mouth in order for us to survive, it will tell you when it doesn't. You'll get hungry when the body's hungry, and you'll eat when your body's hungry, instead of forcing yourself to eat because you got to eat now because this is what you've set the time as. There's no natural process with the eating. So I just want to throw that in there because if that's how the parents are behaving in the home, how do you expect the children to be normal, balanced adults when all this focus was on food and how much and when and how? It's made food a whole issue instead of it just being a natural process. So I just want to put that out there, okay? Because I think that's also part of the problem with children that have anorexia or bulimia. It's because they get criticized for how much they're eating, what they're eating, when they're eating. You can't just, no, you had breakfast, so no, you can't just go and have a little snack now. No, you got to wait till lunchtime. You got all these structures with the food times and stuff. It makes an issue around eating, okay, and around food, what you're eating and when you're eating it. And so it makes it like if a child has a sweet tooth and they're feeling like a sweet, they will find a way to have it. So now they've got to do it clandestine. They've got to hide and do it. So that creates an issue already where you've got to hide what you eat. And I'm telling you, that is probably a major part of the fact that anorexia and bulimia is such a huge issue in our society today. So I'm just going to read anorexia. All right, let me first give this a little bit of extra information. So eating disorders. It's perfectly normal to have your eating behavior disrupted due to stress, say with exams or a breakup of a relationship or a loss. So that it is not considered an eating disorder if there's a reason why it's happening at the time. But if this perpetuates and there's an obsessive focus on food or avoiding food, this will indicate a problem, okay? So anorexia nervosa, which is this is what the definition is. Anorexia nervosa means no appetite caused by nervousness. Doesn't that sound like, well, you're creating the nervousness around food, so doesn't it naturally follow that will take the appetite away? So usually called anorexia, it's a serious eating disorder where a person does not eat enough and has an intense fear of being fat, okay? Most people with anorexia do feel hunger, but take extreme steps to ignore it, often to the point of starvation. Okay, so that's different to what the bulimia is, okay? So in my experience with clients, what is behind anorexia is poor or distorted body image, which could have stemmed from criticism, often from parents. And that seriously, it's a recording. It seriously makes me mad because parents do things to their children completely unaware of the huge impact that they're having. And it's quite funny because that same mother would have been criticized by her mother, and she doesn't think, actually, I remember how it felt for me, so I'm not going to do it to my child. Oh, no. They pass it straight on. So they keep on criticizing. I know with this one guy that I know, the one daughter, and then they discovered she had diabetes. Well, what came first, the criticism or the diabetes? Because, sugar issues are relating to family, not getting enough sweetness in life. So the rest of her family are slim, except for this one girl. But some girls, when they go through their kind of teenage years, like when they're 14, 15, 16, they do get a little bit plump and then they slim out. But the father would always make a comment in company talking about fat people are ugly and, one should never allow yourself to get fat. So I don't know what he was saying to her behind the scenes, but I could always see her flinch when he was talking about it because he was not in public, in company. Where I know he was making the comment because he wanted her to hear it, so that she would be embarrassed enough or whatever to make sure she lost weight or whatever. I don't know what the issue was. And it used to make me so cross, but I thought I can't interfere because she chose this dad. But I know that it's a problem. And did the weight get less? No, the weight got more, because what would have happened with her was everything became an issue around food. And then afterwards, they then found out that she was diabetic. And so if you're diabetic and you're eating the wrong foods, that can also cause a problem. And to this day, she's not a slim girl because she's not a, and by the way, the fathers know Charles Atlas, okay? Funny that. Where you'll get the person that's doing all the criticism, they're not slim and trim. They've got a stomach and everything. So who are you to criticize someone else who's overweight? So I never understood why he did that. I suppose it's the background that he came from, but I always felt so sorry for her. And she's now in her 20s. But I could see the makings of the problem already. With some people that I know better, if I see them do that, I say, oh, I'm going to give you my card. You can book them in for a session now. When they're older, you can get those kids to come and see me. I say, what do you mean? I say, well, when you say that, but I mean, I've got to really know the person well. I can't just say that because most people would be pissed off with that comment. But I bring awareness that way to say that causes a problem later on. You want to be careful speaking to the kids like that. So, but those are few and far between that I can make a comment like that. So either it's to do with eating too much, with the parents' comments, the criticism, or comments like, watch out, you don't get fat, or through teasing and bullying at school. Okay, so if anyone's slightly chubby at school, they'll always, I remember when I was at school, they would say to the girls, oh, fatty, fatty, boom, boom. And I mean, the girl was not only a little bit overweight, so it's just like, man, yeah, society is something else. But remember, as a soul, we chose what our experience needs to be, and we chose who the people were that were going to do it with us. It was all soul contracts, so it's all set up in that way. But you can see how it unfolds, and those things can be reversed. I absolutely believe that completely. And remember that people with anorexia, they could be skin on bone. When they look at their reflection, they see fat. They do not see themselves as they really are. So that's a real problem as well. They have a warped idea of what they look like. Okay, and then the definition of bulimia nervosa, interesting. It's a serious eating disorder marked by binge eating, followed by methods to avoid weight gain. So they've got the loss of control over the eating. Bulimia is an emotional disorder characterized by a distorted body image and an obsessive desire to lose weight, in which bouts of extreme overeating are followed by fasting or self-induced vomiting or purging. So bulimia is different to anorexia. The cause can be the same. The underlying cause can be the same, but the reaction can be different. So the one can become obsessive about wanting to eat the food, where the other one doesn't want to touch it. It's almost like a repulsion to the food because it's worried about getting fat. The other obsession is about needing to eat the food because I can't have it. I'm not allowed to have it. So they then need to eat the food, but then they've got to get it out of their system, and they'll do it by taking laxatives or induced vomiting. So bulimia is different to anorexia, as the individual is unable to control the binge eating, but will then find ways to purge afterwards. I think this can be more dangerous for people to detect as the person eats. So people may not be able to identify what is going on, that there's a problem, because they see the person eating, and then they're very good at hiding the purging. There was a lady that we used to go camping every Easter and the Michaelmas holidays, which would be now our holidays in South Africa, school holidays in South Africa. And so we would go camping in the mountains with we'd go caravanning. And there was this couple that came from up country that would come from there. And so we'd meet in the middle where the mountains were. And so we saw them each time. She was a pretty heavy drinker, but she could hold her own. But she was skin and bone. And so I wondered, with the amount that she eats, I didn't understand why she was so skinny. So I thought, oh, she's obviously got a high metabolism that her body burns it up, And then the one day they were coming down to Durban. I can't remember what they were coming down for. And so we invited them to come and stay with us. And because we were all in the same house, although they were using a different bathroom, because we were all in the same house, she was very on edge because of the fact that we would see her eating when we were all having a barbecue. She'd have a plate full of food and eat all the food. And then she'd say she's got a headache, she needs to go lie down. And she would disappear for ages while everybody would still be socializing. And I can't remember how it came out. But there was a story behind that, okay? So her child died at 2 years old. There was a tragic story. I'd forgotten about that, actually. There was a tragic story where I think something happened with the child and she ran outside for neighbors to help her, but the child was already dead. And that's where this whole thing started, where this whole cycle started. And so I know what the trauma was because I didn't know about the daughter that had died. And I think maybe the husband had told us the story and of the fact of this is what was going on. And we had no clue because to look at her with her behavior, she was upbeat, she was fun. But because we were in the same house, it was noticeable that something was off. Because when you were camping, it didn't matter because you weren't with each other all the time. You were with each other when you were eating, and then everybody would go their separate ways and then come together and have a few drinks and then go your separate ways. It wasn't when you were aware of the person extracting themselves from the social situation. But obviously she would have to do whatever she did, excuse me, straight after eating. So I think the bulimia is a more dangerous one because it's not as easily detected as the anorexia, because the anorexia, you can see they're not eating. So once again, like anorexia, this is caused by being criticized regarding the body image or issues that are created around food or eating. It can also be triggered by trauma. Okay. For school kids, there is the problem of bullying again and cyberbullying. And again, it's interesting to note that regarding the bullying, the people who have a bad body self-image would be the ones that would be happy to criticize someone else's body, because if they're busy getting everybody to look over there and criticize that and tease that person, they're not looking at them. And I've seen people to keep the focus off themselves. And I've seen clients who have said how they hated the way everybody treated them because they thought they were good looking. But they didn't think they were good looking. They hated the attention that they got, the prom queen, etc., because they didn't feel good about themselves and they didn't like people paying attention to them. But isn't that very different to what they actually, the way they portray themselves? So they have this whole false persona that they put out there, so nobody knows what their insecurities are. But if they are mean girls or mean guys, they have poor self-image, because otherwise, if they were okay, they would protect those that were being bullied. They would not be adding to that kind of thing. And also, the underlying issues relating to all eating disorders are relating to distorted or poor body image, to criticism by others and self-criticism or self-hatred, which could also be the result of abuse. So for some people, it can be abuse. For that woman, I don't know if the story was with her, she hated herself and felt like she didn't deserve to be here because her baby died on her watch. I don't know, because we never ever had the conversation around that. In fact, at that time, I don't think I had done the energy healing stuff yet. I hadn't done the energy healing training. That was before. When I think of, that was the early 90s. And I only did my training in 2000. So all that kind of stuff of self-hatred and stuff can be from something that was done, or it's guilt or something, and then you attack the body. It's almost like they don't have the guts to take their life, because that's not, they don't think of it in that way, and yet they are choosing like they wish they were dead, if you know what I mean. It's a imbalance and a skew way that they look at themselves, and they hate themselves, and so they do everything they can to self-destruct. Same thing goes when they cut. They're trying to destroy themselves or destroy their body because they don't think that they are good enough. So I'm going to stop there because tomorrow I'll do the post-traumatic stress and the Asperger's and the autism and the ADD and ADHD, because I think that's a pretty huge subject all on its own. So I'm going to open up to any questions now to see if anybody has any questions about what I've said. So all I've done is try to give the metaphysical perspective on what's really going, or my perspective on what's really going on behind the scenes of all these so-called disorders. But very often there are things that can be, if you understand what it is and what's behind it. And I truly believe in the body-mind connection, that nothing happens with the physical body or in behavior and stuff without a mental or emotional thing that happened before the presenting symptoms, So are there any questions? I can't actually believe I fitted all that into just over an hour.
Well, I found it very interesting, Allison, that you said that dementia could possibly be caused by something traumatic that happened in somebody's life. Knowing that my husband is, has the onset of dementia and stuff, and knowing that he suffers from PTSD and being a veteran and stuff. Yeah, I've never heard that perspective before on it.
Well, especially with people that have had PTSD, and PTSD is not only relating to the military, although that's a big. I mean, I think that's where people really became aware of it, because I'm damn sure there are going to be people that have suffered PTSD with this whole COVID thing. There's and whatever's going to happen afterwards. But when the army guy or the military guys have identified, what do you call it? Witnessed the stuff, that the atrocities that they've witnessed, that the initial shock of all of that is what creates the PTSD. Okay. And where they have these things repeating over and over again, remembering that what causes the problem is that their memories, they can't stop the flashes of memories coming up. So what do they try to do? They don't want to remember. They make a concerted effort not to remember. But what happens then, memory is memory. If you want to shut it down, it shuts everything down. So slowly, it creates a divide where they can shut it out, but then they can't. They can shut it out, and then it'll just be for longer and longer periods. So I truly believe if one can clear whatever the PTSD is, the stuff behind that, to let go of that, and I believe it can be done if one can clear all the shock of what they witnessed and what they observed. There's no need for the dementia to develop. There's no need for them to want to forget, because it'll just be something that they had the experience of. The trauma will be removed, and I know I can remove the trauma of things, so that would be no different to do it for veterans, for sure. I remember a woman coming to me who, she didn't have email. I think someone gifted her the session. It was in Tacoma, and she was head of some group that were the wives of veterans that came back that had PTSD and couldn't function, couldn't get back into, so it was a support group of wives that couldn't get back into normal life after all the atrocities that they'd seen. And I can understand that. It's like, oh my God, with all that we've seen, how do you carry on normally as if nothing's happened? How can you still party and laugh? And don't you know all the stuff that's happened? So I can understand what their reaction is around that. It just feels surreal that people still act normal when all these atrocities have gone on, or what they've witnessed. And a lot of these guys are really sensitive guys, or the women are really sensitive. Some of them didn't choose to go to the military or didn't anticipate that kind of experience, especially if they know that some of the stuff was really unnecessary, the amount of brute force that was used. Because I wish I was able to get hold of her, because I would like to have gone and worked with her group, with the men. But I was able to change her whole perspective to do with her husband, where she was ready to leave. She was ready to divorce him, and she said, he doesn't want to be with me. And I said, no, it's a cry for help. You've got to stay. Just love him, love him, love him, love him. You can't. He's just thinking that he's broken now, so he's not good enough for you. So that's why he's going to say he doesn't love you, he doesn't want to be with you. That's not what they mean. That is not what they mean. It's just that they feel you deserve, the spouse deserves something better than who and what they are now that they are broken, But I believe anything can be healed. So, dementia would be related to post-traumatic stress, because abuse, shock, rape, that is still post-traumatic stress after that. So if you heard whatever so the person may not be a veteran, but if you heard what their story is, it was probably as traumatic as what a vet has gone through. You know what I mean? Clear that, and you don't need the dementia, and you don't need the Alzheimer's. Sorry, Wanda, what did you say?
No, I was totally in agreement with you. And yes, I've gone through that with my husband and stuff. I'm not good enough, and I've gone through all of that. So I can totally relate to that part of it.
Okay, good. Then we need to talk, you and I. Are there any other questions? And I can't remember if I said I spoke to my friend that's got bipolar. I wanted to make sure that what I'd written down to say was correct, accurate, and because she had shock therapy. She went into an institution when she was, I think, 19, and they gave her shock treatment, and I still said to her, well, I think maybe didn't the shock treatment make you bipolar? And she said, oh yeah, most of the people that have bipolar, when you find out the story behind it, they have had shock treatment at some point in their treatment regime. So it's quite interesting that she said that. Yeah.